Hey, we've got another topic we're going to talk about. Today we're going to talk about how greed has killed the church. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 9, they that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. Titus chapter 1 verse 9, holding fast the faithful word as he hath been taught, that he may be able by sound doctrine both to exhort and to convince the gainsayers. For there are many unruly and vain talkers and deceivers, especially they of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole houses, teaching things which they ought not for filthy lucre's sake. And I think both me and Lana's growing up, we have seen a shift toward this, toward the love of money and doing things for filthy lucre's sake. I know when I was a kid, it seemed like the churches, they were all smaller churches. Not talking about Catholic, but the evangelical Christian type churches. They were all small. And the people who were, if you were a pastor of a church, it was more of a loose organization. You know, maybe you were, say, part of a Baptist organization, but all that really meant back then was that you had Baptist teachings, and that was pretty much the extent to which the organization was involved. Each pastor could lead his church how he saw fit, and usually someone became a pastor by they felt a call from God. In order to be ordained as a pastor, a lot of times, if you went to a seminary and you graduated, they would not give you a degree from seminary school unless you say that you felt a call from God or led by the Lord to be a pastor. It was a very serious, reverent type of thing, and the pastors of a church did so to lead people to the Lord so they may be saved and they may walk in the Spirit. That was the idea. I understood a lot of them, maybe they didn't have sound doctrine and maybe they didn't do, a good job in it. Maybe they taught some bad doctrine, but the point is their heart was all in the right place. They didn't do it for money. They didn't do it for power. They did it because they loved the Lord and they wanted others to go to heaven and they wanted others to serve the Lord as well. And that was the focus of the church. It would just be a small group of people. Maybe they took their doctrine from the Baptists and they had their doctrine statement there. But the church the focus was all about leading people to the Lord and people serving God. And now it has gone toward what we see in 1 Timothy 6 and in Titus. It's all about the money. And yeah, they still are part of the Baptist organization, but now the Baptists are controlling and saying this is what you need to do to grow your church. And when you are in seminary, they don't just teach you God's word. It's all about, well, here's figure out what kind of size of a congregation you want, and then we'll teach you how to grow it to that size. And marketing, look at what area where you can get people, look at where you could put a church, look at where there are other churches already and see where they are weak, and so then you can come up with the strategy to get people away from that church and come to your church. And that's why you have all these mega churches now, because it's all about getting people in, getting money from them. And then when they do come in, it's not about leading them to the Lord or getting them to serve God. It's about getting them to give money, and it's all emphasis on money. Instead of taking one offering, they'll take 2 or 3 offerings, and then they invent causes. Missionaryism is a big thing. When I was going to church as a kid, we had missionaries, but it was rarely talked about. We couldn't afford that stuff.
Yeah, because it was too, back then, to send somebody to another country, that took a lot of money. The flight alone would cost a lot of money. So, today, it's it was more sincere if you heard somebody would go say, oh, we're going to send somebody to this country. It was like, oh, wow, because you couldn't afford to send somebody. So we're raising money. But now it's just like, oh, we're collecting money for missions. Okay, here's $1. That's pretty much how it is.
We even went to a mega church on a Christmas Eve, and instead of talking about the birth of Christ, which they did a little bit, the main focus was showing a video presentation on how their missions money was being used, and then taking up an offering for missions. So it's all about, the focus now has gotten away from someone who leads the church, who just loves the Lord and wants people to be saved and come into the knowledge of the truth. And the focus now is, how do we build the church? How do we grow? Get satellite campuses, make the church bigger, get people to keep coming, get them to give more money, more and more money, and then we can use the money to pocket it for our own greed.
Well, and also, if you notice that they, when they, oh goodness, am I having a brain fart? I can't even remember what I was going to say. It basically, you, if you ever go to a church, or if you talk to people that belong to it, just any church, the first thing they want to do is they say they want people to come to their church. It's a numbers game. They want people to come to the church, and then they specifically want the younger people to come to the church, because they're trying to, if a church is dying, the first thing that they're looking for is more people to come to the church, because they want, number one, they want more money, but number two, then they want the youth, because they figure the youth, once they get in there, they'll stay at that church. And then once they get a job, they'll start giving money, and they just want to keep the numbers up. But it's basically, now you got people that, oh, what church do you go to? Oh, I go to this church over here. Oh, really? Well, you should come visit our church. Well, wait a minute. I just told you I go to a church. Why are you asking me to come visit your church? Oh, he's so wonderful. Our pastor is so wonderful. Or, oh, the music is great. Usually the music is great. So they're just trying to get you to come to their church, because if you get more people coming to the church, the more likely you'll get more money.
It's basically a change in attitude is what's happened. It's a change in attitude toward the love of money, toward greed, for doing things for filthy lucre's sake. When I grew up, it was a small church. We didn't have a lot of money. We did good to get enough money in the offering to pay for the pastor and to pay for bills. And yet there wasn't a big focus on that. You didn't hear money talked about that often, because that wasn't the goal. The goal of the church was not to raise money. The goal of the church was for people to be saved and to serve the Lord. And that's what the sermons were catered around. And we didn't talk anything about, well, we want to make sure we get the young people. We want to increase the attendance. We had things where we asked people to invite people to come to church, or we went and knocked on doors around the neighborhood to invite them when we had a revival or something special going on, to try to get people to come to church. But it wasn't, let's get them in and get their money. That wasn't the attitude. The attitude is, the people around us are lost and going to hell, and we don't want them. We love them enough that we don't want them to go to hell. So we're trying to get them to come in and be, so that they may be saved. It's not about getting their money. And so it was all about, the whole attitude, the whole focus was, the pastor would be there, and he was there to get people saved, to come to the knowledge of the truth. If there wasn't money for the pastor to pay him, but we had a church that tried to support the pastor and give him a salary. There were times when the pastor, there wasn't enough money coming in for him to live on. there was one guy who came in, he was retired, and he just did it for free. There was another guy who was a young guy who just graduated from the college that our church had. He came in, and we couldn't afford to pay him. He took a job driving an airport shuttle bus during the day. He hated that job. It was driving in traffic. The guy, this was in Southern California, and the guy we got came from Kansas. You talk about culture shock. And now he's driving in airport traffic in Los Angeles every day. But he did it because he loved the Lord and he wanted people to be saved. So he says, I'm going to keep being the pastor here, even if I've got to do this horrible job in a city that I don't like being in, because I want people to be saved. That attitude is not found today. Today, it's all about you go to the seminary and you find out how to grow the church, how to make money, and how to you get missions. It's all driven around money and numbers. Get people in, get the money. That's why you don't hear a clear gospel taught. That's why you don't hear sound doctrine taught. That's why you hear 2 Timothy 4 going on. The time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. And so what we see happening today is just a fulfillment of what's in 1 and 2 Timothy and Titus. That people think, like it says there in 1 Timothy chapter 6, verse 5, perverse disputings of men of corrupt minds, destitute of the truth, supposing that gain is godliness. Before, pastors of churches and churches they weren't involved in an organization to grow the people. The only reason they were part of the Baptist organization was just so you knew that what doctrine they taught. And then they did their own things, and they weren't worried about raising money. And if the money wasn't there, they didn't try to guilt the people into giving 2 or 3 offerings. They went out and got a job. Imagine that, working a job and being a pastor on Sunday. Isn't that a novel concept? That's what they did because they loved the Lord. And if you didn't like the doctrine that they taught, you didn't like them teaching that you're going to hell if you don't trust in Jesus' death as atonement for your sins, or you don't like them telling you that following the lust of the flesh is bad, they didn't care. They didn't change their doctrine just to get more people in there and get more money coming in. They didn't change the music because no one wants to sing the hymns. They want to follow the lust of the flesh with this new age music. They didn't do that stuff. There was a different attitude back then. It was they loved the Lord, they were truly saved, and they wanted others to be saved. And nowadays, the church, greed, going after money, has killed the doctrine. People don't care about God anymore.
Well, and also, I don't know if anybody's ever noticed, but before, back in the day, you invite somebody to church, and it's happened a couple of times when I was going to a small church and then ended up going to a mega church, and now we are the church.
Yeah. Welcome to our church service.
Welcome to our church service. And you invite somebody to church because you want them to be saved. Well, I ask them if they want to, come back. And they're like, no. And, they're just trying to be nice. They don't want to tell you, the real reason why. They say, oh, it's a nice church. I liked it. And you're thinking, okay, good. Maybe they might come back, might get saved. And then when you ask them again, they're like, when they finally decide they're going to tell you the truth, they say, your pastor was talking on tithing. Give money. And they're like, every time I'm invited to a church, it's always about tithing. They want money for this. They want money for that. And that's all churches want. And so as I grew, end up in a mega church, I invite people to church, and the same thing, they would just come out and straight out tell me, no, I don't go to church. Oh, you don't believe in Jesus? And it was like, no, I believe in Jesus, I just don't go to church. And I was like, oh, well, what's wrong? And they said, every time I go, they're talking about giving money. Give money here, give money here. So I knew at around February, that was the month that they would start talking about money. So I knew to invite people that wasn't in months that I knew the church wasn't going to ask for money. And I would tell the person in advance, well, you don't have to worry about the sermon being on money because they do that in February. And they go, oh, okay. Well, then they came. And so, but now a lot of people are not going to church because it's continuous. Like Eric said, we went on a Christmas Eve service. Did they talk about baby Jesus? Not so much. What did they show? Films. Oh, we're doing mission trips. We need to get money for mission. I was so furious. I was just so furious. I wanted to leave right then, but it was my mom's church, and we were there because Mom wanted us to go, so we went. And I just wanted to get up and leave. I was just so furious, and so, you know, that's pretty much how it is. People are not going to go now to church, number one, because there's more atheists now. And number two, because constantly asking for money. People are tired of it. If they're tired of being taxed, don't you think they're tired of the church saying, hey, we got another building fund? I'll be like, well, set up a tent because you ain't getting it.
Well, that Christmas Eve service is just the perfect example of the change in attitude. Lana and I go to the service thinking this is a tremendous opportunity because you have new people there, people who are just visiting family. It's a tremendous opportunity to share the gospel so that they may be saved. And that is what would happen when I was growing up. The churches with their Christmas Eve service would use it as an opportunity to be saved because that is their goal. It's for people to be saved and to serve the Lord. But now, because the church's goal is to get money, instead of them seeing it as, oh, this is a great opportunity to share the gospel to new people so that they may be saved, instead they look at it and say, well, this is a great opportunity to get money from people. So instead of sharing the gospel on a Christmas Eve service, they share their plea for money. And it goes right along with 1 Timothy 6:9. They that will be rich fall into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. The reason they're drowned in destruction and perdition is because now they won't even go to church because they're just going to talk about money. And if they do go to church, they're not going to hear the gospel. So instead of going and hearing the gospel and maybe getting the gift of eternal life, instead they were already in destruction and perdition because of their sin. And they, by following money, drown men in that destruction and perdition. They're already sinking in the mire. And instead of lifting them up with the gospel, they just pour more mire on them, drown them in it so that they won't be saved. And so greed has killed the church. Did you have anything else?
That's it.
All right. Thanks for watching.